Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Liz Punchin, and I'm the Director and Acting Branch Manager at P2P Recruitment Victoria. It is my pleasure to be hosting you all today for our talent webinar, Finding a Job in Victoria. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land in which we meet today, the people of the Kulin Nation. I also pay my respects to their elders past and present. Today, I'm joined by Kathy Derbyshire, who will be providing CV and resume tips, Will Hillgrove, who will be discussing how to stand out in a virtual online job interview, and Michelle Younes, who will be sharing some tips on counter offer management. There will also be an opportunity to ask any questions, so please drop your questions in the chat box below. Now, let's firstly review the current state of the Victorian job market. In 2022, the Victorian economy has strengthened its position as Australia's second largest job market and is slowly closing the gap with New South Wales. After taking the crown of being the city with the longest lockdown, it is clear to see that Melbourne has bounced back. As of February 2022, 26.4% of job advertisements are now Victorian-based. Unemployment in Victoria has peaked at 7.5% in 2020 and has now dropped to 4.5% of March 2022. As of May of this year, the national unemployment rate is 3.9%. Regional Victoria has enjoyed healthier employment levels than Melbourne, and both regional and city areas have reached a combined unemployment rate that is the lowest on record for our state. Growth in the job market, coupled with record unemployment levels, have changed the recruitment landscape. Whilst it was a candidate short market before the COVID pandemic, the market is now heavily candidate driven. What does this mean for you? Since March 2020, our teams have interviewed over 1,500 job seekers and over 900 business leaders, representing more than 600,000 employees to identify new workplace trends and job seeker expectations. Our results show that 43% of businesses are hiring to assist with growth, and 30% are hiring to replace existing roles, and 18% are hiring to drive change. In Victoria, 50% of candidates surveyed said that they are actively looking for work, whereas 39% either are not active or hesitant to move. The Great Resignation has brought most organisations to review their employer value proposition to ensure that they match the current market expectations. In this candidate short market, job seekers' expectations towards salary packages and flexibility has changed. For what was nice to have before is now a requirement today. Attraction and retention is a challenge for businesses right now, especially if they haven't moved with the times with salary increases and with their flexibility policy. This creates the perfect storm for candidates to be in the driver's seat. If you are ready to make a move, there is high demand in all industries and sectors. Within People to People, we have seen an increased need within customer service, administration, warehouse staff, HR and recruitment, and legal support, just to name a few. We are still awaiting an influx of international workers to return to pre-COVID levels, which does increase the challenges of recruiting skilled roles. We are consulting with employers every day to ensure that they are aware that there is an increased level of competition in the market. On top of the unemployment rate, the conversation around inflation, the cost of living, changing government, and how it has been a hot topic in the media in recent weeks and months. So what can you do to stand out from the crowd to secure your dream role at the right salary? I'd love to introduce you to Kathy Derbyshire, who will be sharing some resume tips.
Thank you, Liz. My name is Kathy Derbyshire and I'm a permanent recruitment consultant and specialise in business support, property, sales and customer service. Today, I will be talking to you about updating your CV in 2022, and I will be covering what to include in your CV and some useful tips. So what is a CV? A curriculum vitae is Latin for course of life. It is a detailed document which summarises your career history, qualifications, education and skills, and it is an opportunity to demonstrate what you can offer an employer. You can showcase your achievements and also influence the employer or recruiter to interview with you. A cover letter is a document submitted with your CV to strengthen your application and express your enthusiasm about working for an organisation. It is important to emphasise your achievements and why you are the right candidate for the role. A cover letter may not be necessary for all job applications, and some job ads will specify if a cover letter is required. So what to include in your CV? We'll start with page 1. So on page 1, you will want to include your full name and contact details with a minimum of 2 forms of contact, so both a phone number and an email address. Also ensure that you include your suburb. So this is particularly helpful for recruiters, as we can often, refer other positions that we have available, which may be in your local area. You will also want to include a link to your LinkedIn profile. So recruiters or hiring managers will Google your name or search for your profile on social media anyway, and a LinkedIn profile can depict you in a professional light and definitely strengthen your application. I would advise to create one if you haven't already, and ensure that it is up to date and that the roles that you have listed and dates are aligned with your CV as well. Also on page 1, you will want to include a professional summary. So this is a short introduction to your CV, and it can be a few sentences long, outlining what you specialise in, your years of experience, what you can offer, and what you are looking for in your next position. Finally, on the first page, I would recommend including a career summary. So this can be presented in bullet points, outlining your positions, companies, and dates of employment. Having this information on the first page allows a recruiter or hiring manager to understand the industries that you have worked in without scrolling through the entire document to find out. We'll move on to page 2 and onwards. So on page 2, you will be including information about your work experience. So it's important to note your key responsibilities in each role and your key achievements. So an example of a key achievement could be that you were the top performing sales agent in your organisation, and highlighting your key achievements allows a recruiter to sell your profile to a hiring manager. Next, you will want to include your education and qualifications. For example, if you have a tertiary education or completed any certificates, I would then go on to list your skills. So ensure that they are relevant to the position, and you can include skills including communication, time management, teamwork, attention to detail, or organisational skills. Finally, you can include your referees, and if you don't feel comfortable listing them on your CV at an application stage of the process, you can always write referees available on request and then disclose that information at a later stage. Please note that people to people will always request your permission before conducting any reference checks, even if they are listed. Some additional sections to include on your CV, you can include any internships or apprenticeships that you have completed. You can include any endorsements. For example, if you have a previous manager who has provided a quote about your work ethic, and you can include any volunteer work and extracurricular activities. For example, if you're involved in any community groups or sports, and team sports can highlight to an employer that you're able to work well in a team environment, and it also demonstrates the personal side to your profile. And if you do come from a background within marketing or digital, you may also want to include a link to your portfolio. So my useful tips for today, my first tip for you is on tailoring your CV. So you will want to use keywords and phrases that are relevant for the role that you're applying for, and note any relevant skills, experience, education that is aligned with that role and the organisation. If you are applying for multiple positions, ensure that you have created multiple versions of your CV. For example, if you're applying for an EA role and a customer service role, one CV should highlight your admin and secretarial experience, whilst the other one should highlight your customer service skills. My second tip is on formatting. So firstly, use a font which is easy to read. For example, Calibri and Arial. You don't want to use any cursive writing that is difficult for the reader. I would also recommend using bullet points over paragraphs and to use headings throughout your CV. When listing your work and education history, ensure to list this in reverse chronological order. So you want your most recent experience at the top of your CV. Keep it concise. Your CV isn't an essay and should be at maximum 4 to 5 pages long. You may choose to also include a photo. Now, this is entirely optional. Some candidates would prefer not to, but if you are using a photo, ensure that the photo, that you have selected depicts you in the best light or professional manner. So use a professional headshot, or you can have a friend take a photo for you against a wall or with the background blurred, but keep it corporate and natural and don't use any filters or special effects. If you do have a background in marketing or design, you can showcase your skills and present your CV in a stylish but polished manner. And it goes without saying, but ensure that you have checked for spelling and grammar, and you can consider having a friend check over your CV for you. And this is particularly important if you're applying for a role where written communication is needed. Finally, when you save the document, I would recommend saving it in both a Word doc and a PDF format. And some job ads will specify what format is required, therefore it's handy to have both. My third tip is on using keywords, and we spoke briefly about keywords earlier, but I just wanted to give you some context. Keywords are important for recruiters or hiring managers when searching databases. So keywords can include skills, industry, or software programs. For example, if you've used Salesforce or Xero, and keywords can be used if you speak multiple languages. For example, if a recruiter is looking for someone who can speak Mandarin, they would search the word Mandarin on their database. Finally, use keywords that relate to any duties that you're responsible for, which may be niche. For example, if you're working in an accounting firm and you're responsible for ATO and ASIC lodgements, then include the terms ATO and ASIC in your responsibilities. My fourth and final tip is on listing temporary roles. It is important to mark down roles as temporary or contract, as hiring managers may question you why you were in a role for a short period of time or why you appear to be jumpy. And a tip is to use the heading temporary roles and then list the roles, organisations and dates underneath that heading. If you have been working on temporary roles with one organisation, for example, if you've been working with people to people, then include people to people recruitment as your heading, and then you can note all of your assignments below that. I would also advise you to include what the contract was for example, if it was a maternity leave contract, and also note if the contract was extended. Overall, your CV is a tool which you can use to showcase your skills and experience and stand out to employers. A recruiter or hiring manager may only glance over your CV before moving on, so ensure that you have put your best foot forward. I hope these tips were helpful for you, and I'll throw it back to Liz.
Wonderful. Great tips, Kathy. Thank you so much. I'd love to introduce you all now to Will Hillgrove, who will be discussing tips on nailing your virtual job interview.
Thank you, Liz. Hi, everyone. My name is Will Hillgrove, and I'm a temporary recruitment consultant in the business support and government specialisations here at P2P Melbourne. I wanted to provide some tips on how to stand out in a virtual interview. It's no secret that the virtual interview is a very different experience for both the candidate and the employer, and there are many different factors that you can control as a candidate to ensure your experience is a good one. Before COVID, the virtual interview was something that was rarely used by businesses, but it has now become very common for many of our clients to use them regularly. From a candidate's perspective, it's important that we use the virtual interview to our advantage and put our best foot forward. And I'll give you some valuable tips now that you can use in the future. So the first point I wanted to cover is the actual setting up of the interview. As a candidate, you want to be as prepared as possible for a virtual interview to ensure the entire video call runs smoothly. Something that I would recommend is having a practice of setting up the video call to ensure that the video link works, the internet connection is strong, and the video function is working, as well as the audio function. By checking these 4 factors prior to the interview, we can be certain that the call is going to run smoothly when the real interview comes around. It's also important to note that there will be an expectation from hiring managers as well as recruiters for you to have your camera on throughout that virtual interview. Something else that would be worth checking is the level of background noise and making sure you're in a quiet location for that interview. Another factor to consider is the location in which you attend the interview and the background that you actually have. I'd recommend attending the interview indoors with your device on a steady surface where it won't be moving around a lot. It can be quite distracting for hiring managers when candidates attend interviews in inappropriate locations or have a camera that's shaking throughout the interview. Having a simple background in your interview will also ensure that hiring managers are just focusing on what you have to say rather than being distracted by other things in the background of the video call. The second point I wanted to cover is the first impressions that you have on a hiring manager during that virtual interview. When a candidate has an interview in person, there are many factors that can assist in having a really strong first impression, and some of these factors may be removed when attending a virtual interview. So it's important that we put our best foot forward with these factors that we can control. One of the major factors that can assist with a strong first impression is what we're wearing. It may feel strange to have corporate clothing on for an interview conducted in your own house, but those efforts will say a lot to clients about your interest in the company as well as the position. In some cases, the hiring manager may not expect you to be corporately dressed for that interview, and recruitment consultants will often indicate what the dress code will be prior to that interview. But when in doubt, it's better to be overdressed rather than underdressed for that virtual interview. Another factor that contributes to the first impression is when you actually arrive for that virtual interview. And this point goes back to making sure that your technology is set up properly prior to the interview. Being on time to the interview is a controllable factor that starts the interview on a really good note rather than being late and essentially putting you at a disadvantage from the outset of that interview. This reiterates the importance of making sure that your technology is working before the call starts and making sure that you're not in a rush prior to the interview. Finally, I wanted to speak about the preparation that can be done before attending an interview with an organisation. And there are many resources out there that can prepare you for a virtual interview. A great starting point is the company's website. And it's critical that we have an understanding of what the company does and how they are actually unique in their market. Often hiring managers will ask a candidate what they know about the company, and this is a chance for you to show that you've done your research and that you've looked into the business prior to the interview. I would also recommend having a strong understanding of the position that you're interviewing for and what the roles and responsibilities will actually consist of day to day. You'll be able to find this in the position description for the role, and often recruiters will give you an overview of the position over the phone. So I'd recommend taking some notes of the main points and asking recruiters any questions you have while running through the role over the phone. Ensuring that you have an understanding of the role will allow you to adapt your examples from your previous work. And you'll be able to use those examples throughout the interview. LinkedIn will also provide great insights for you leading into the interview. And I'd suggest looking up the person who's actually conducting that interview prior. Looking into their work history, how long they've been in their current role, and the positions that they have had in the past to get to where they are now. If you can do this and drop these little insights throughout the interview, the hiring manager is likely to be really impressed with that prior research that you've actually done. Throughout all of this preparation, I'd recommend writing down any questions that may come to mind. So there are 4 key areas that you can focus your questioning around. So I do have a few different examples here, and you're more than welcome to take any screenshots throughout, but I wanted to focus on 4 key areas, including the company, the role, the culture, and the hiring manager. So firstly, for the company, I have what are some of the projects that you're currently working on as a business? What are the growth plans for the business moving forward? And how big is the team that I would be working in? For the role, I have what does a typical day look like in this position? What challenges am I likely to face in this position? And what does the progression path through the business look like? For culture, I've suggested how would you describe the culture of the business? What are the attributes of a top performer in the business? And are there any activities you do internally to build team culture overall? And for the hiring manager, my last section is what do you like about working for this company? How would you describe your experience working here? And what advice would you give to someone who is just starting in this business? So that wraps up my tips on how to stand out in a virtual interview, and I'll pass back to Liz now.
Thank you, Will. Great insights there. The virtual interview is very much the norm in this post-COVID world, so good to have those tips for our candidates today. So last but not least, I'd love to introduce you to Michelle, and she's going to discuss counter-offer management.
Thank you, Liz. Hi, everyone. My name's Michelle Eunice, and I'm a specialist recruitment consultant at P2P, supporting the temporary team across all specializations, including accounting and finance, supply chain, and business support. Finding a new job can be really exciting. It can open up new challenges in life, create new and lifelong friendships, and new experiences and challenges. However, it can be understandably difficult to leave your current employer. On top of this, counter offers can leave you feeling confused and unsure about your own decisions. Today, I'll be discussing what a counter offer is, why counter offers are made, how to effectively handle a counter offer, and how to ensure a peaceful exit from your current employer. Now, a counter offer is essentially an offer that is made from your current employer in response to an offer made from another employer. A counter offer generally aims to compete with the offer you received in order to convince you to stay at your existing job and ultimately decline your new offer. It can be enticing and make you second guess your decision. A salary increase, growth opportunities, a promotion, more flexibility, change in days or hours worked, a new job title, increased responsibilities and duties, especially in areas that you are particularly interested in, or all of these things combined are examples of what a counter offer can look like. A counter offer can be extremely tempting and quite attractive, but that's the intention. Your employer will say all these really nice and lovely things about you, how great you are, and how well you've performed, and what they can offer you to convince you to stay. It will feel really flattering to hear all of these things, but again, that is the intention. It'll be easy for you to want to accept it in the moment, but it's important to keep in mind why counter offers are actually made. Counter offers are generally made because it can often be easier to keep someone familiar with the role and the business, someone who already has the right skills for the role and is a good culture fit, rather than having to find a replacement. The recruitment process is not an easy one. It requires money, time, and the right resources to replace you. And that is something that your current employer might not have. Recruiting another employee at your level can be extremely expensive. Therefore, it is likely that if they can avoid the interview, onboarding, and training process, they will. Often a counter offer can be referred to as a band-aid solution, temporarily covering the underlying issues of why you wanted to leave in the first place. And usually someone who does accept a counter offer ends up resigning within 6 months. That's why it's really important to sit back and think about why you wanted to leave in the first place. What are your motivators? What are your objectives? And again, what made you want to leave initially? There could be many factors for wanting to leave. Is it money, or are you bored in the role? Are you needing more responsibility or more recognition? Or are you wanting to work with a bigger or a smaller team? Think about what your employer could do or say to convince you to stay. If you love your job and you love your team, but you want a pay rise or more work from home flexibility, then explore these options with your manager first. This will save your time as well as the recruiter or a hiring manager's time. If you've taken a step back and realized there is nothing that your employer could do or say to make you stay, then the underlying factors and motivations for wanting to leave are important to listen to and to trust yourself. We can expect counter offers in this market, and although it's flattering and tempting to want to accept, it's important to ask for at least 24 to 48 hours to consider it. This time will allow you to rethink your motivations and your objectives for leaving rather than impulsively agreeing in the moment. In this time, reflect on why your manager didn't offer you any of these things before you resigned. If the counter offer cannot meet your motivations for looking elsewhere in the first place, then it is probably best to decline the offer. Ultimately, it is your decision whether or not you do accept a counter offer. However, it's important to understand what your future goals and objectives are and the negatives of what might happen after accepting a counter offer. I would suggest making a pros and cons list so you can really visualize your motivations on paper. If you are working with a recruiter, I would recommend being open and honest if presented with a counter offer. They can often help guide you in times like these. Be honest with your recruiter in your initial interview about why you're wanting to move on from your current role. Don't just give us an answer that you think we want to hear. We really want to help guide you and align what you want with any job opportunities. And we can't do that if you're not being completely honest about what it is that you actually want. If you decide to accept the counter offer, keep in mind that trust might be lost from both your manager and your fellow colleagues. You might have accepted a new challenge or a pay rise from when accepting a counter offer. So keep in mind that your employer might demand more of you in this instance. Your resignation will also be remembered. And if you've stayed for more money, your loyalty might also be questioned. If you decide that your reasons for leaving are bigger than a pay rise or flexibility and are related to things such as environment, future career growth, or happiness, then you can ensure a peaceful exit by having the discussion with your employer and thanking them for the opportunity that they have given you to stay. Once you have made that decision that you will be moving on, it's important to leave with your head held high. You want to leave the door open because truly you just never know what might happen in the future. New employers may require a reference from previous and most recent employers, so it's important to leave on good terms to allow the space for that. You want to leave with them only having good things to say about you. Now, I will go through some resignation management tips. You want to start by writing and handing in your letter of resignation and giving your employer notice. A letter of resignation is written to announce your intention to leave your current position, and a notice period is the length of time your employer is aware of your departure before you actually leave. Your notice period essentially starts from when you hand in your letter of resignation to your last day of work. The length of your notice period can vary, and you can find this in your employment contract. As a casual employee, you generally are not required to give notice. However, I would recommend doing the right thing by your employer and providing them with at least a few days just to give them the chance to plan for your departure. Again, this will also help you leave on a more positive note and keep the door open for future references that might be required. Here is an example of a resignation letter. Please feel free to screenshot the template and adjust it as required. So start by writing your full name, address, contact number, and email as you would with any letter. Date the letter and address it to your manager. In your letter of resignation, you can state that after careful consideration, you've decided to accept a new job opportunity. You can include your last day of work that is in accordance with your notice period. Take the time to thank your employer in your letter of resignation. And finally, feel free to ask for a reference in the letter, both in the letter and in person. Finally, if you do require any further assistance on how to manage your resignation and counter offers, please feel free to reach out to me or any recruiter. We can often guide you in these situations as it is something that we often do deal with on a regular basis. So thank you again, and I'll throw it back to Liz.
Great advice, Michelle. Thank you so much for your insights. Let's just have a quick check now of any questions that have come throughout the presentation. So looks like Steve has contributed a couple of questions. So thank you, Steve. First question, do you have any advice on how you could address a COVID redundancy in my CV? So very good question, Steve. So we know a lot of people were impacted, particularly in 2020 with redundancies. So it is very common across the world to have had a termination or resignation or redundancy in 2020. So you can include a reason for leaving or reason for the role to have ended on your resume. So you can include that, or obviously when you do get a phone call, you can explain any gaps that are COVID related. It is very common. So it's very normal to include it, or just highlight it when you do get to a phone interview or virtual or face-to-face interview. And your second question does relate to virtual interviews. So are virtual job interviews going to continue to be the preferred way forward, or do you think that they are going back to face-to-face meetings? So I feel like, thankfully, in Melbourne, we are out of lockdown now. So I know employers would prefer to have at least one face-to-face interview, but we are finding that first round interviews are typically still virtual. It does help with keeping the process moving. So it is, I guess, a point of convenience. Even at People to People, the large majority of our registration interviews are still conducted virtually, purely for convenience for candidates, but obviously more than welcome to come into our office for a face-to-face interview as well. So thank you for those questions, Steve. It looks like a couple more are typing. So Lina has asked, hi People to People, what are the chances of getting hired in an executive corporate role on a student visa, unlimited work hours? So really good question, Lina. So the landscape for student visas has changed in a very exciting update and development, that student visas do have more hours that they can work, which does mean that you, I guess, are more attractive to a potential employer. So if you want to message us after this with your resume, if you're not already registered, and I'll get one of the team to contact you with your experience. But we do have student visa temps working for us right now, working full-time hours, which is a real win for student visas during this post-COVID world. So messages are flying through now, which is great. Thomas has asked, I've always been hesitant to look up interviewers or recruiters on LinkedIn, as obviously they will get notified, but you don't think that would be a negative? Not at all, Thomas. So you can change your settings on LinkedIn to make that private if you prefer. So message me after this if you want some tips on how to make that private. But I think it does show that you've gone out of your way to research and prepare for the interview. So hopefully the interviewer is just flattered with the level of preparation that you've done. So definitely have a look at their individual profile. It can be a conversation starter. You can see their tenure or where they've come from prior to the company that you're interviewing for. But certainly you can look at their company page, and they shouldn't get notified on the company page as well. So it looks like just one final question. So Michael has asked, I have a lot of professional experience, but I can't seem to find a job as I get closer to retirement. So sorry to hear that, Michael. So I'm definitely keen to chat to you one-on-one after the webinar. So we'll add our contact details at the end of the webinar. So hopefully we can assist you. Yeah, in this candidate short market at the moment, hopefully employers are definitely being very open to candidates of all demographics. So yeah, hopefully we can assist you soon as well. So, and just one final question. Oh no, two more questions. Apologies if I pronounce this name incorrectly, Yumika. I am from Sri Lanka and want to know if there's any opportunities for HR roles with visa sponsorships. So we do find at People to People that traditionally the roles that we work on do require full working rights, but we can also give you some insights offline as well, Yumika. And Lena's got another question. Is hybrid or remote the new world of work? So really, really good question. So we are finding that a lot of employers now are trying to encourage their staff to come back in more of a hybrid model. And there are businesses that have completely opted to 100% work from home, but we're finding that there is a lot of value of having that hybrid model introduced. So you do get that flexibility, but you also get that time to be with the team in the office. Even within People to People, we find that training and support that you need at the beginning of your employment. It's just a much easier and smoother transition if you do get as much time in the office with the team as possible. On the other end of the spectrum, companies that are opting and preferring for their staff to be in the office full time, we are definitely trying to consult them to say that the world has moved towards more of a hybrid model. It's not more of a perk, it's more of a must-have to attract the right candidates and retain the right candidates to their roles. So I'd say hybrid is where a lot of businesses are, but you will find that there are roles that are 100% work from home. And we certainly find when we do advertise those roles that we get inundated with interest. So clearly there is a big push and interest in working from home more so than in the office. But a blend is what a lot of companies have introduced from COVID and especially in Melbourne, once we were able to return to the office, introduce that flexibility piece as well. So I'll just leave it for another couple of seconds. It looks like Lena's typing, but if you do have any other questions, you can definitely message the team after this. So we just want to take this opportunity to say thank you so much for your time today. We hope that you found the market report useful. If you would like to connect with Kathy, Will, Michelle, or any of the Melbourne team, you can reach us on 1300 338 546, or you can message us on our socials. We would love to assist you with your job search, whether it be temporary, contract, or permanent. So if you haven't already registered with us, please message us after this and we'll get one of the team to speak to you. We have lots of new roles coming in every day that we would love to share with you. If you know anyone in your network that would be interested in these market insights or also registering with our agency, it would be great for you to connect us with them today as well. We'll keep you posted with future webinars and events, but for now, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.